What is guilt and how to overcome it? Often, we feel guilty about something we've done or failed to do. This unpleasant emotion arises when our actions don't align with our moral values or social norms. Sometimes we don't even understand where this feeling of guilt comes from or why we feel it. Many people live with a constant sense of guilt, even when they haven't done anything wrong. They often take responsibility for situations beyond their control, blaming themselves for things they couldn't possibly have changed. Here are a few examples. A wife feels guilty about the death of her alcoholic husband because she couldn't stop him from his destructive habit. A 50-year-old daughter feels guilty for not spending all her time caring for her elderly mother, instead of occasionally focusing on her own family. A husband feels guilty for not being able to afford a luxurious vacation in Italy for his stay-at-home wife, and only took her to Turkey instead. These are all examples of unhealthy guilt. In these cases, the person experiencing guilt has no control over the situation, and this emotion is clearly destructive. When we feel guilty, our behavior can become illogical. We blame ourselves, and in some cases, this can lead to depression. Guilt is often accompanied by shame, fear of judgment, self-blame, and pity, usually directed toward others rather than ourselves. It can have a severely destructive impact on our well-being and mental health. Types of guilt. We can categorize guilt into two types. Healthy guilt. This type of guilt arises when we genuinely commit an act that harms or hurts someone else. For example, unintentionally insulting someone in the heat of an argument or accidentally causing harm. In these cases, guilt is justified, and to relieve it, we can apologize and make amends if there was any material damage. Once we take action to remedy the situation, the guilt subsides. Neurotic guilt. This type of guilt is often implanted by others, sometimes with subtle or even unconscious intentions. This type of guilt often stems from childhood, when parents may shame or blame their children based on their own rigid views of right and wrong. Sometimes, parents even shift the responsibility for family issues onto the child, causing them to grow up with a chronic sense of guilt. As adults, such individuals find it easy to assume responsibility for things that aren't their fault and often feel guilty unnecessarily. This kind of guilt is manipulative. If someone uses your guilt to get their way, or if you find it difficult to say no without feeling guilty, you're likely being manipulated. How to free yourself from guilt. To release yourself from the destructive grip of guilt, the first step is to recognize it and understand which type of guilt it is. If it's healthy guilt, the solution is clear: apologize or compensate for the harm caused. If it's impossible to apologize in person for any reason, you can use a therapeutic technique called the empty chair technique, where you imagine the person you've hurt sitting in the chair and speak your apology to them. Often, this exercise helps people release the guilt. Dealing with toxic or neurotic guilt is more challenging. If the guilt stems from childhood or manipulative parental figures, it's important to separate yourself from those imposed expectations. Understand that your parents, or anyone else, may have used guilt as a tool to manipulate you, and it's essential to reclaim your own feelings and responsibilities. You can start by analyzing whether the guilt is truly yours. Was the situation your responsibility? Could you have done anything to change the outcome? If you weren't responsible and had no control over the situation, the guilt is not yours to carry. Sometimes, guilt becomes so deeply ingrained in our psyche that personal efforts may not be enough. In these cases, it might be necessary to consult a specialist to help you unpack and deal with the deeper emotional layers. Exercise to release guilt, the letter of apology. This exercise helps you cope with feelings of guilt and release them in a constructive way. Write a letter of apology. Write a letter as if you were apologizing to the person you feel guilty toward. The key here is not to send it, but to express your true feelings of regret and responsibility for your actions. Be as honest and specific as possible in your letter. What do you wish you had done differently? What are you apologizing for? And how can you make amends, even symbolically? Forgive yourself. After writing the letter, take a moment to forgive yourself. Place your hand over your heart and say to yourself, I acknowledge the mistakes I've made, and I choose to learn from them. not punish myself for them. Understand that self-forgiveness is key to healing. This exercise helps you process the guilt in a safe and controlled way and release it gradually. Conclusion: guilt is a powerful emotion that, when dealt with properly, can be a learning tool. However, when it becomes excessive or irrational, it can be deeply destructive. By understanding where the guilt comes from and taking steps to address it, you can free yourself from its burden. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the Mind Patterns channel for more tips on mental health and emotional well-being. And as always, feel free to share your stories and experiences in the comments. How do you deal with guilt? How have you been able to overcome feelings of self-blame?